the creative journey. It's easy to get lost, but don't worry, you'll lift off. Sometimes you just need a creative pep talk.
Okay, so this is the 7 steps that I would take in 2025 if I was starting my creative practice today and I knew everything that I know today, having had a creative practice for over 15 years, something like that. It's a creative practice, not a math practice. I haven't practiced math in a long time. Not a practicing math person, mathematician. Anyway. Here's what I would do if I was starting from scratch today. And I'm doing this episode because, first of all, things change a lot. So this is updated. What I would do today is differently than I would do in a previously year. Things change a lot, and how I approach it changes. And also, this is kind of, some of these ideas are scattered throughout the podcast Creative Pep Talk that I've been doing for 10 years. And so I thought, what if I just collect them all together? And this will be kind of a best practices as I see them right now, like the essential things to be doing in your creative practice to make sure that you are building progress. Here we go. 7 things. They're sequential, 7 steps. The first one is build a freaking newsletter, man. And this is just me talking to myself in the past. Why are you building an Instagram, buddy? Build the newsletter. You can also do Instagram, but start with the newsletter. If you don't have the newsletter, start with the freaking newsletter. Just start building it. This is the idea, don't put a hot tub and a brand new kitchen in the rental property that you'll never get the money back on. Don't invest and make creative, awesome stuff for places you don't own, like Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is, whatever platform. Like, it is a waste. Instead, invest in something that you can keep forever. Build on your own property, which is your email. Now, for me, right now in 2025, the sweet spot of these 2 things is Substack. Now, Substack isn't perfect. We're not going to go into all that. There's definitely some, there's definitely valid critiques of Substack. However, here's what I love about it in 2025 and why I've invested a lot of time there over the past year. The main thing is that, yes, it has some of the functionality of other platforms. I've discovered a lot of great artists and writers on Substack in the app by, through the notes function, which kind of acts like Twitter. Some incredible creative things I've discovered that way. So they have this organic reach, and that's great. But it also has the functionality of a newsletter, and you get that functionality for free. Whereas a couple hundred subscribers on another platform is going to cost you a monthly amount. Substack is free because the way they monetize is if you create a paywall for some of your benefits or some of your emails, they take a percentage of that. So if you don't create a paywall, it's just free. And that's incredible. But even more incredible than that is that you aren't owned. Your list isn't owned by the landlord that is Zuckerberg and Musk. You own that relationship because at any time you can export that entire list onto any other email platform, onto a spreadsheet. Because you're not building followers in a random space, you're building subscribers. That's a game changer. And so if I was starting today, that's the first thing I would do is I would get that newsletter. And the other cool thing about Substack is it doesn't have to be writing. If that's not your forte, if you get intimidated by grammar, I get it. You can also do audio newsletters there. You can do free podcasting. You can actually do a podcast and host it there for free, and even set up the RSS to go to all the podcasting apps and just do a podcast through Substack. And so I would start there, and I wouldn't get fancy with it. I wouldn't be like, this is the newsletter this is the daily take. This is the hot topic newsletter. No, I would just make it your name, so that even if you're in a band, I would make it your name so that can evolve with you for the rest of your creative journey. That, to me, that is the most valuable resource. This is the thing that bands like Grateful Dead have been doing with mailing lists and keeping connection, owning a connection to the people that want to hear from you and not letting anybody else get in between that. And at the time being of making this, Substack is making it so that they aren't mitigating the ownership. And that might change. And if that changes, then I will export that list and go somewhere else where I can continue to build on my own property. So that's the first thing I would do. The second thing I would do is I would choose a platform based on native fit for the type of creative work that I'm doing. And for me right now, as an illustrator and writer, I actually think Substack can work for this too, because people go to Substack to discover illustration and writing. The idea here is that you're choosing a platform where people go, where people are hungry for the thing that you're serving. Okay? This is the idea that if you want to open a restaurant in the mall, you don't go hand out samples at JCPenney. People aren't hungry at JCPenney, man. They're hungry when they're walking towards or through the food court. That's where you want to hand out samples and give them a taste of what you're doing. That's what you're doing on social media. You're giving them a sample of your product. If you don't have a product, by the way, getting discovered isn't really, it doesn't really matter. But here's what I would do. Choose a platform that is native to the creative stuff, natively creatively to the stuff that you do. And if you're an illustrator or writer, this is not evergreen material right here saying that Substack's a good spot for that. It's been a really interesting spot for me recently. That might change relatively quickly. But if you're a musician, I would do this on Spotify. I would treat your Spotify like social media and not like a discography. Save your discography for your vinyl, for your the things that you actually want to press out in the real world, and use Spotify to release stuff and test stuff and give people samples of what you do, because you can't make money there hardly anyway. If you're a comedian, I'd probably say TikTok. If you're an entertainer of some kind, I'd probably say YouTube. But really, the best answer there is going to be being deeply connected to your people, the people that do what you do, and finding out where they go and where people discover them, and making sure that you have a presence there. So that's the second thing. The third thing is test with small bets of creativity on that platform. So this is the idea of treasure prospecting, gold prospector. Be the old prospector and get out there and drill thousands of holes that you can test for gold. Like what you don't want to do is create an album, to create a gallery show, to create this huge statement of work when you're just getting started. You don't even know what works. You don't even know what connects with you. You don't know what connects with other people. You're trying to find the Venn diagram of that thing. If you're a working artist, which is kind of what this show's about. It's not really about just the kind of art that's just a diary where you're just journaling to yourself and you're only pleasing yourself. I actually think that's a great place to start as a creative. Even if you're a working artist, start with the stuff that connects with you. Don't go up on stage and test material that doesn't resonate with you. That's a terrible idea. Start with you. But like Rick Rubin says, the audience comes last, but he's not saying that they don't come into the equation. Like if you're a working artist, part of what is firing you up is not just expressing yourself to yourself, but connecting to other people and seeing that other people resonate or get what you're saying or get something from what you're saying. The third thing is test with small bets. And so gold prospecting, or looking for oil, whatever. You're not going to just pick a random spot with your creativity and say, I'm going to spend 3 years making a book right there. No, what I would do is I would write on stage like comedians do, where they go to the clubs, they have a list of material, a bunch of random jokes, a bunch of holes that they're drilling, and they try it all out and they see how it feels. They see how it connects. They see if they just miss completely, or is there something there and they got to go back and maybe dig a bunch of different places around there. You're trying to find like hints that there is gold here before you dive deep, before you dig deep into a particular area. So if you're a musician, what this could look like is, instead of working on your album, just release singles and maybe EPs on Spotify. And just keep doing that until you hit something that feels resonant to you and resonant to others. One little aside here is that when I was starting out, whenever you're starting out, I wouldn't value quantity of feedback too highly because it's just too random. And only certain types of creative work go viral. If you think about the things that meant the most to you, that really connected with you on a deep level, that changed you as a person, those creative things, those were movies, those were songs, those were pieces of work, those were books, they were things that would never, ever, ever go viral. I can almost guarantee you that. So going viral, if you can hack it, you can make that work, and that's part of your process, and it makes sense for your, the flow of your customers. That's great, fine. It's a gift if you can do that. But most of us are going to be making creative work, especially if we're building something for a living, especially if we're optimizing for self-expression and connection, aren't going to be valuing what we do through virality or for quantity. And instead, especially in those early days, all you're going to have is the quality of feedback. And so as you're releasing those singles, as you're releasing those EPs, what you're looking for is your own taste, getting high on your own supply and being like, is this doing it? Is this like hitting me? Is it, I remember hearing Tom York in an interview talking about how a lot of his lyrics, he's not really sure what they mean. He just knows that when they make him well up, that he's on to something. And one of my all-time recent favorite musicians, Alex G, I celebrate the entire back catalog of this guy. He talks about the same thing, is that he doesn't really know what he's saying. He just knows when he's feeling what he's saying. And he's like, that's like, oh, I've hit a nerve in my unconscious here with the words and the melody, and I'm moving towards that. And so as you're putting out this stuff, even does it feel authentic when you put it out? What do you feel like a month later? What do you feel like when you're writing it? You're trying to hit that vein, but then you're also seeing, how do my friends, how do my peers? One of the most valuable things that I ever experienced as a creative was being in college with a few other illustrators who had similar tastes, different skill sets, different abilities, and just the healthy competition of like, oh man, they made that. Oh, that makes me want to level up my game. And then I made something that impressed them, and that makes me want to double down in that direction. Like, that is valuable. That's fun. I don't know why we have this anti-comparison trap thing. And it's true. You don't want to let the world tell you what you need to be doing. You don't want to get onto Instagram and see one person, they're working on kids' books, and the next person's working on podcasts, and the next person's working on editorial, the next person's working on writing a book. Like, what, you don't want to see all that stuff and just run around willy-nilly and let it decide what you're going to be doing. So I get that on that level, the comparison trap thing. But I think this thing of like working with a little bit of community, working with a little bit of healthy competition, trying to impress each other, trying to get feedback, seeing what hits, that kind of quality feedback where someone said, that piece I'm obsessed with. I take notice when people who have similar taste to me, people whose taste I really respect, say stuff like that. And I think, okay, I hit a little bit of gold there. What would it look like to turn that single into an EP? What would it look like to turn that EP into an album? That's the fourth thing. So the fourth thing is create a product around when you hit. If you've done 6 posts, 50 posts, whatever it is of whatever you're doing, and you find one that is just hitting it for you and hitting it for other people, then it's time to take that thing to the next level. You know, I've heard it talked about in business, this idea of like you're firing these little shots onto the horizon, waiting for a hit, and then you're getting your cannon out. And now you're going to double down. Now you're going to go to the lab. Now you're going to make an album, a zine, a book, a whole portfolio in that direction. And if I was just starting out, it would go from a single to an EP, a small bet to a medium bet. If it's an EP that I'm like, oh, this is it, then I'm going to move from an EP to an album. But I'm just going to slowly start creating that special from that handful of jokes that worked. The fifth thing I would do is I would launch. Now, I didn't do this well when I was just starting out, but what you want to do is you don't want to just put all that work and act like you're Beyonce and just drop it on the internet and expect everything. You know, if you build it, they will come. That just doesn't work if you don't have people that are already interested in what you do. And so what I would do is I would make a plan to make this thing. I'd create a little bit of a deadline, and then I would think about doing a bare bones kind of GoFundMe or Kickstarter, you know, just the bare amount, the small amount, bare minimum that I would need to make this thing a reality, and create some constraints and some timelines and some deadlines around it. And the other thing about the launch, the other thing I've loved about doing Kickstarters or GoFundMes, that kind of thing, is that it's not just great for raising a little bit of money, it's even better for the PR. It's even better for getting on people's radar, telling people this is the thing that I'm doing. And it has a timeline. There's like a scarcity element to it. This is happening in real life, in real time, in my practice. And I'm investing in it. And I care about it so much, I would like you to invest in it. And I would also probably pair that with some kind of in real life component. You know, that launch, a launch party, a mini launch party, bake a cake. We've done that. We've just baked a cake and took a picture of it and said we're celebrating the launch, like whatever it is, but make it real. And yeah, I think that there's something cool that, you know, when we've done like book tour stops and stuff, rarely does that move a lot of books, but just the experience, first and foremost, just makes it real to you, which is so, I mean, God, what the hell are we doing if all we're doing is posting crap to the internet? Like, do something that makes it real for your real life where you can look back and remember that, because you're not going to remember the day that, you know, you got another like on a social media platform, or, you know, the third day of your Kickstarter or whatever. You're going to remember that cake, man. Remember every cake. Enjoy every sandwich. Can't remember who said that, but it was a comedian, I think. Have an in real life component for yourself. And also because, you know, just again, that's another level that's a touch point for people in real life and online that says, this is a real thing that happened. And some of those book tour stops, the photos of that make it apparent to people in real life and online that this is a real experience that we are really invested in. All right, that's 5. Set the launch. Do a launch. Number 6, collabs leading up to the event. This is remixes and features with other artists, doing remixes of the songs, releasing those in drips. This is pod swaps, like swapping guests on another podcast, or feed drops where you're dropping one of their episodes in your feed and they're dropping one in their feed. Collaborative posts on Instagram where you're making illustrations, where you're illustrating half of it, they're illustrating half of it. By the way, it's just fun. It's just fun. Okay? Not only is it great career strategy. It's one of the only ways that you're going to get on anybody else's radar is featuring on a song with an artist that they already like, or being an opening act for another artist. Like, the best way to be discovered by potential new fans is by connecting with people that make similar stuff to you. And not only that, like I said, not only is it a great way to get discovered, it's just more fun. Like, being part of the scene is part of the joy of making stuff. And so as you lead up to the launch and then after the launch, I would be doing a series of collaborative things, whatever it is you do, with people that make stuff in your scene and in your genre. 7, launch and post-mortem. Okay, after you do the launch, here's what I would do. I would go back through the process and I would say, which of these things went well? Which of these things didn't go well? If it didn't get the results you were looking for, where did it, some of that's just your expectations were wrong. You just thought this thing was going to change everything overnight. I had to do a version of this process 10 times for it to get anywhere really significantly interesting. Like, it reminds me of Jonathan Larson, the guy who created the movie Rent. Highly recommend going and watching Tick, Tick, Boom, the movie version with Andrew Garfield that Lin-Manuel Miranda put out a few years ago on Netflix, because it's such a good, it's a little bit discouraging in a way, but it sets real expectations. And it's also motivating because you're seeing these people that are part of this scene and loving working with each other, making stuff that they love. And it's about how Jonathan Larson did this. He's the guy who made Rent, this mega hit on Broadway. But he had to make 2 other plays before that didn't really go anywhere. The first one being this take on 1984, this sci-fi weird, rock opera thing. And it was his baby. This was his masterwork. He put everything into this. And really it just led to the next thing. And I think that's a good expectation. We did an episode recently where we're talking about how creative work isn't about winning the game. It's about playing the game. It's about keeping it up in the air. And about, Judd Apatow, the filmmaker, talking about how he doesn't make movies to just like win the game and get all the awards and get all the money. He just wants to make a movie that he loves that does well enough where they let him make another movie. And that's enough for him. Like that, if you love the creative game, that's the right expectation. I think that's the way to go into it. And so, okay, 7 is the postmortem. You're looking at how it went, trying to pinpoint where did this thing go wrong, and then you do it all over again and try something different at that stage. Maybe you pick the wrong platform, and it's not really where people go to discover the kind of things that you do. Maybe the small bets were wrong. You ended up going with vanity metric of likes, where you should have gone with the thing that really resonated with you the most and with some of your core friends and peers. So look back through it, figure out which part you want to tweak, and then do it all over again. So that's what I would do. And I plan on doing this, like I said, as long as they'll let you. Like, that's the fun part. I loved hearing Gary Goldman on the comedian on Mike Birbiglia's podcast talking about this, like saying he's in the sweet spot. He's not mega famous. He's not super rich. He has a legit creative practice, and he just wants the gift of being able to do this forever now. Like that's the dream. For me, that is the dream. Is you're doing it, you're getting by, you're loving every minute of it. And so if I was starting today in 2025, I would do this, and then I'd do it again, and I'd do it again, and I'd do it again, because guess what? That is what I'm doing. If you follow along, you will see me doing this over and over and over again. I've probably done it 10 times in my creative practice, and I hope that I get to do it 10 more, because it's great. It's fun. Speaking of Substack, we talked about that a bunch of times. I'm going to put in the post of this episode on Substack, andyjpizza.substack.com. I'm going to put a little flow chart that has these 7 things in it that can help you go through and ask yourself, do you have a newsletter? Yes. Okay. You can move on to number 2. No, get a newsletter. And I really say that. Like, go sign up to wherever you want, check out the different pros and cons. I like Substack for a whole bunch of reasons. If you get on there, come subscribe to my thing. Every week, we're going to give you a new episode of this show so that you can stay pepped, so you can string together staying in the habit of being creative, in the creative mindset, remembering that you want to make this more than just a hobby, a thing that you do randomly, but you want to make it a practice. That's what we make this show for every single week. And if you sign up anywhere else, it might get lost in the algorithm. You might lose track of it, and therefore also potentially that top of mind reminder that you want to be creative week in and week out. And so you can sign up at anniejpizza.substack.com, and you can find the flow chart there in this episode. We try to put little goodies in there as well as remind you when an episode drops so you never miss one. Thank you to Sophie Miller, the editor and co-producer of the show. Thanks to Connor Jones of Pending Beautiful for audio and video edits and sound design. Thanks to Yoni Wolf and the band Why for our theme music and our glorious soundtrack. And thanks to all of you for listening. Until we speak again, stay pepped up.